You make the point that the momentum has been strong, but also that it's been relatively uncommon. Can you sort of characterize what we've been through this past few weeks?
Yeah, momentum has really built upon itself with breadth. And that's really the key to momentum, that when you have strong momentum, if you don't have breadth, if it's just price without a high participation rate, it really doesn't mean much. But several of our indicators have triggered, 20-day highs have triggered, the percentage of issues above their own 20-day moving average is triggered. So the combination of those is pretty rare and pretty unique. And what we find historically is when that happens, it's usually the beginning of a bull market. You can have retests. It is unusual to have retests, but it has happened in the past. But the momentum signal is usually a very powerful signal out the next 3 to 6 months. And we had that, really in earnest at the end of July, and then confirmed in the early part of August.
Right. There were obviously a lot of eyes watching the 50% retrace. Then there were a lot of eyes watching the 200-day. And then there were eyes watching the sort of stall out at the 200-day. Was any of that concerning in these last few days?
No, not really. What I'm actually encouraged by, and this is just, 30 years of doing this in the business, I'm encouraged that it's really hard to find the bullish narrative. When I know what the narrative is, that makes it too easy and everybody's invested. This is one of the more disdained rallies and momentum moves I've seen in my career. And usually that's a good sign, not a bad sign. So I can't give you the narrative. I'd love to sit here and tell you exactly what's happening, Carl, and all the boxes that we're checking. But what I know is that price tends to lead the narrative. And we're seeing that, as I said, in earnest. And that to me is good news, not bad news.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if you had to guess what the narrative was that price was implying, is it as simple as peak inflation, or do you think there's something else mixed in there that pertains to growth?
Yeah, you have to do that to me, don't you? That's an unfair question, but I think you hit it. I think if there was anything that I would be looking at that says, hey, what is consistent with what we're seeing? I think it is the peak inflation fears is probably the better way to put it. In other words, I don't know that, inflation, in fact, I don't think inflation is going to be 2% by the end of this year, but I think the fears of inflation probably peak somewhere around the Humphrey Hawkins meeting, to be honest with you. And whatever happens from this point forward is probably considered good news by the market, not bad. Now, again, that might require a retest. That might be something that builds upon itself as we go. But I do think if there's something that squares here with history, of the price momentum and that narrative, it would be something to do with peak inflation, or at least peak inflation fears.